I stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing a cracked plate, the water lukewarm and cloudy from all the soap. Outside, the sky had begun to bruise that deep, tired blue just before the dark folds over Ashton Hills. I glanced at the clock on the wall. 5:47. In 13 minutes, the door would creak open, and the house would come alive with noise. Again, it always did. For 2 years after Peter died, the silence in this house clung to the walls like dust. I used to cry into the same dish towel I now used to clean up spilled juice or wipe down sticky counters. I missed him then, I still do, though it feels more like an ache now, dull and constant. He died sitting up in his armchair, watching an old western, his coffee half full and going cold. 1 minute he was there, breathing, humming along to the theme song. The next, he wasn't. Joel, my son, came first, with his 2 boys and a cardboard box of clothes. He said it would just be for a few weeks, until things settle, he promised. Lana, my daughter, followed a month later, her divorce papers still warm from the printer, tugging little Sadie behind her like an afterthought. She said she just needed a breather. That was 4 years ago. Now, the house is never quiet. It's filled with thudding footsteps, open-mouth chewing, slammed doors, and questions shouted from across rooms. And no matter how much I clean, it always smells like burnt toast and mildew. Every morning I sweep and mop and fluff the couch cushions, and by noon it looks like a flea market blew through the place. They don't pay for anything. Not the groceries that disappear faster than I can bag them. Not the water that runs endlessly during their long showers. And not the electricity that powers their tablets, game consoles. And the hallway light Lana always forgets to turn off. Joel once offered me $20 after he got a bonus, but that was months ago, and it felt more like hush money than help. I buy the food. I cook the meals. I fold their laundry when they forget it in the dryer. I watch their children, who treat my living room like a jungle gym, and me like a bench to rest on. And yet, I can't remember the last time one of them asked how I was doing. They only ask, "What's for dinner?" This morning, I made eggs and toast. I sat down to eat mine, but by the time I'd gotten a sip of my tea, Sadie was crying because she wanted syrup, and Jake had spilled milk all over the floor. Joel walked in, half-dressed, and asked if I could drop the boys at practice later. Lana texted from upstairs, asking if I'd pick up Sadie from school. I agreed. I always agree. My room, once a quiet retreat, has become a last refuge. Even then, the kids barge in without knocking, and someone is always leaving laundry or bags on my bed. Yesterday, I found one of Jake's soccer cleats under my pillow. It wasn't even wet with sweat anymore, just stale and forgotten. Peter used to say this house was too big for just the 2 of us. Now it's too full, and yet somehow lonelier than ever. I miss the gentle hush of our old life, the clink of his spoon in his mug, his slippers scuffing the hallway. All of that's gone now, replaced with noise, demands, and the feeling that I'm just background noise in a home I built. I sometimes wonder if they'd even notice if I stopped cooking, stopped folding, stopped giving, maybe for a day. Then they'd order pizza, toss another load in the washer, and let it sit there. Maybe that's what I am now, the washer. Always running, never thanked. Only noticed when I stop working. There's an exhaustion that doesn't come from age or lack of sleep, but from being needed and never wanted. That's what I feel these days. And no one asks me if I'm tired, only if I have time to babysit. It was a Tuesday morning when the envelope came. Yellow, wrinkled at the corners, tucked halfway under a stack of pizza coupons and Lana's Amazon returns. I almost didn't see it. But something about the red ink stamped on the corner made my heart slow. I opened it with the same cautious hands I used to fold Peter's funeral program. Final notice. The gas bill hadn't been paid. Again. Joel was supposed to take care of it this time. We'd talked about it well. I had talked. He'd nodded, halfway listening, thumbs busy scrolling his phone. Yeah, Mom. I got it, promise. That was 2 weeks ago. Now the house we all shared, this home I'd kept warm for 40 years, was about to go cold. I sat at the kitchen table in my robe, the letter trembling between my fingers. My tea had gone cold. The silence of the morning felt heavier than usual, like even the walls were waiting to see what I'd do. I reached into the little metal box in the laundry room, the one with emergency taped across it in Peter's handwriting. There wasn't much left. A few bills. A few coins. Enough to cover the notice, just barely. I paid it that afternoon, walking to the post office alone, though my knees ached and the sky threatened rain. That evening, the house smelled of roasted chicken and rosemary me doing, of course. I set the table for 6. Joel was late, Lana was on her phone, and the kids were already fighting over who got the drumsticks. I tried to hold on to the small piece of the meal, the tiny ritual of passing plates and refilling water glasses, but peace is fragile in this house. Somewhere between bites and bickering, Lana cleared her throat and said, "So we've been thinking." That phrase has never once led to something good. She looked at Joel, who suddenly found interest in his mashed potatoes. "We've just noticed how tired you've been lately, Mom, and, well, maybe it's time you considered a retirement apartment. Just something smaller, quieter, for your own good." I felt it like a slap. Not a dramatic, theatrical slap. Just the kind that stings for a long time. I blinked at her, unsure I'd heard her right, but she kept talking. About amenities, about senior socials and game nights and peace of mind. Joel finally spoke up. "It's not that we don't appreciate everything. You've done a lot. You deserve to relax now." I nodded slowly, trying to keep my face still. I even smiled a little, but inside, something split. Not loud, just a clean, quiet tear. They wanted the house, that's what this was. Not because I couldn't manage, not because they worried about me, but because I had become inconvenient, a relic in a space they wanted to claim. My name might still be on the deed, but I wasn't welcome here, not really. "It's for your own good," Lana repeated, as if those words would soften the betrayal. But what I heard was, "We're done with you now." I cleared the plates. I rinsed the dishes. I wiped down the counters like I always do. Nobody noticed I didn't say much. Nobody saw my hands trembling. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, looking at Peter's old slippers by the door. They're still there, 2 years gone, untouched. I don't know why I keep them. Maybe because it's one of the few things left in this house that feels like mine. I cried for the first time in months. Not loud, not gasping, just quiet tears that soaked into my pillow, while the sounds of laughter echoed down the hallway. They say home is where the heart is. But tonight, mine feels like a storage room where everyone leaves their baggage and expects me to carry it. I'm not tired from age. I'm tired from being needed only when it's easy. And the cruelest part? I loved them so much I didn't even see it coming. The next morning, I didn't get out of bed right away. I laid there listening to the ceiling fan hum and the thumps of little feet running through the hallway. I'd been a grandmother before I was ever done being a mother, and now I wasn't sure where I belonged in either role. The house buzzed with life, but none of it felt like mine anymore. I felt like a ghost walking her own hallways. I called Marla that afternoon. We hadn't talked much in months, not because of anything between us, just life. Or maybe it was because I didn't want to admit how bad things had gotten. Marla's always had a sharp tongue and a soft heart, and I knew the second I opened my mouth, she'd see straight through me. We met at the diner off Highway 9, the one with the chipped coffee mugs and the waitresses who still call you Hon. even when your hair's gone grey. Marla slid into the booth across from me, set down her purse with a thud, and took one look at me before saying, "You look like hell." I laughed, and then I cried, right there in that booth with my hands wrapped around a mug of weak coffee. I told her everything about the bill, the gas shut-off notice, the dinner table ambush, and the suggestion that I disappear into some retirement complex like a piece of old furniture moved into storage. Marla listened, nodding occasionally, arms folded tight across her chest. When I finished, she leaned forward and said, "You're not old, Bridget. You're being cornered." Her voice wasn't angry, it was tired. Tired for me. I stared at the cream swirling in my coffee. "What am I supposed to do, Marla? Kick my own kids out?" She didn't blink. "If they were strangers taking advantage of you, wouldn't you?" That hit me square in the chest. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She slid a card across the table. "Calvin Dorr. He helped my sister when her son started treating her house like a halfway inn. He's good, and he doesn't flinch when things get ugly." I called him the next day. Calvin had a soft-spoken voice and eyes that reminded me of an old Labrador kind, but not naive. His office was quiet, lined with books and a photo of his own mother on the wall. I told him my story, stumbling through it, feeling embarrassed every step of the way. He didn't judge me, didn't rush me either. When I was done, he sat back and said, plain as day, "Legally, you can evict them. If they don't have a lease, they don't have standing. This is still your home." I blinked at him. Even if they're my children." He nodded. Even then. I'd expected something more complicated. A mess of red tape. Some cruel technicality that would trap me longer. But instead, the law stood with me. I felt a wave of something I hadn't felt in a long while. Relief. Not the kind that makes you shout. The kind that settles low in your belly and makes your hands stop shaking. Calvin got to work right away. 30 days. That's what the papers said. He handed them to me in a folder and looked me in the eye. "It won't be easy," he said, "but you're not wrong for doing it." I sat in my car outside his office for a long time, the papers in my lap. The sky had turned overcast, and the air smelled like rain. I thought about Joel's baby girl sleeping in the back bedroom with the cartoon wallpaper. I thought about Lana's oldest, who still hugged me before school. I thought about Peter, what he would say if he was still here. And then I thought about myself. Not the mother, not the grandmother, but the woman. The woman who gave up her peace to save everyone else's, and who had finally found someone to tell her that enough was enough. The guilt came in waves that night. I made dinner. I smiled. I tucked little ones into bed. But inside, something had shifted. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was just surviving the day. I felt like I was standing up. 30 days. That's what they had. I didn't know what the next few weeks would bring, but I knew one thing with quiet certainty. This house was still mine, and I was done being invisible inside it. The folder sat heavy in my lap for 3 days. I kept it tucked beneath the cushion of the old armchair in the Den Peters chair. Every time I passed it, I felt its weight like a stone in my chest. The words were there, waiting to be said, and I knew once they left my mouth, there'd be no taking them back. But silence, I'd learned, is just another kind of surrender, and I'd surrendered enough. I asked them to sit down after dinner on a Sunday. No big speech, no warnings, just, "Can everyone sit a minute?" The kids were running wild in the living room, cartoons flickering on low volume. Lana had just finished snapping at me for not buying almond milk. Joel was scrolling on his phone, half listening like always. I held the folder in my lap and tried not to let my hands shake. I cleared my throat and began to read, voice slow and trembling. "This is an official 30-day notice to vacate the premises." I didn't get any further. "What the hell is this?" Lana's voice cracked like a whip, sharp and loud. She was on her feet before I could say another word. "Are you evicting us? Are you serious, Mom?" Joel looked like I'd slapped him. He blinked at me like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You can't be serious. After everything we've been through." I folded the paper in half and set it on the coffee table, trying to breathe through the burn in my throat. "This house was meant to help you get back on your feet," I said, "not to bury me under your weight." Lana scoffed. "Unbelievable. You're just throwing us out? Your own kids? What are we supposed to do?" "You should have thought about that before you decided I didn't matter anymore," I whispered, barely able to keep my voice steady. "You're tearing this family apart," Joel said, his voice hollow. "You're abandoning us." That word abandoning clawed at something inside me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask them where that word had been when I was up every morning packing school lunches, when I'd skipped doctor appointments to babysit, when I used the last of my savings to keep the heat on. Instead, I said nothing, because if I spoke then, I wouldn't have been able to stop the anger. One of the little ones came around the corner, rubbing his eyes. "Grandma, are you mad at Mommy?" he asked, his voice so small, it broke something clean inside me. I bent down to him, brushing the hair from his forehead. "No, sweetheart. Grandma's just tired." But that wasn't the truth, not really. I wasn't just tired. I was depleted. I'd given until there was nothing left to give, and still they asked for more. Lana stormed down the hallway, cursing under her breath, slamming the bedroom door so hard the frame shuddered. Joel sat there for a while longer, looking at the floor like he couldn't find the words. "I never thought you'd do something like this," he said finally. I stood quiet in the doorway. I never thought I'd have to. That night, I sat on the porch, with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders. The crickets were loud, the stars dim behind a veil of clouds. From inside, I could still hear the sounds of dishes clattering, cartoons echoing off the walls, one of the children crying in confusion. The weight of what I'd done pressed down on me, but underneath it was a strange, unexpected feeling. Not peace, not yet, but something close. A beginning. They spent the next 30 days cycling between fury and nostalgia slamming doors one day, hugging me tearfully the next. Lana cried in the kitchen over old photo albums, clutching a snapshot of her 6th birthday. Joel offered to start helping with bills now, as if the gesture could erase the years that had gone before, but I didn't budge. Not out of spite, not out of vengeance. I stayed firm because I had to. Because if I gave an inch now, I'd be back at the bottom of the same well, staring up at a sky that never gave me light. I called a realtor named Janet, who reminded me a little of myself when I was younger, sharp-eyed. No nonsense, with a kindness tucked behind her brisk tone. She walked through my home like a surgeon preparing for a delicate operation, pointing out what would need patching, painting, staging. I followed her with a nod and a notepad, already feeling the house pull away from me like a tide going out. I looked at listings in Fairview. There was a little white cottage near Stillwater Lake, just off a gravel road, surrounded by pine and quiet. A front porch big enough for a rocking chair. A back garden thick with daffodils. I could already see myself their knees in the dirt, the hum of dragonflies. No voices shouting over cartoons or slamming doors. Just silence. Just peace. Move-out day came wrapped in a cloudy sky and that odd stillness right after a storm. Lana didn't say much. She packed the car with her kids and shut the trunk with a final, decisive thud. Joel left earlier, barely meeting my eyes as he mumbled something about staying at a friend's until he figured things out. There were no apologies, no big dramatic farewells. Just a dull ache behind my ribs as the driveway emptied and the house exhaled around me. I stood in the living room for a long time, the walls echoing. So much noise had filled this placolater. Arguments, little feet pounding the stairs. Now, it was just me and the wallpaper, faded from sun and memory. But I wasn't grieving anymore. Not really. I was remembering and letting go. Selling the house didn't hurt the way I thought it would. It felt like shedding an old skin, like closing a book that had too many chapters written in someone else's hand. The day I moved into the cottage, the sun spilled through the windows like warm honey. The air smelled of moss and early spring. I unpacked slow, steady, room by room. I didn't rush. I had time now. I had space. In the kitchen of my peaceful cottage, I placed a vase of fresh daisies white, cheerful, reaching toward the window light. I stared at them for a long time, that tightness in my chest finally loosening. For the first time in years, I smiled without it hurting. I sat at the small table by the window, sipping tea, watching a squirrel dart through the tall grass. I didn't hear anyone call my name. No one asked what was for dinner. No one handed me a bill or a crying toddler. It was just me, and it was enough. Sometimes, I still think of them. Lana, Joel, the grandkids. I hope they find what they're looking for. I hope they learn to stand on their own. And maybe, just maybe, they'll remember the woman who gave everything and finally learn to give something back to herself. Sometimes, the hardest part of love is knowing when to let go. And to whoever needs to hear this, maybe you've given until you're hollow. Maybe you're tired of being needed but never seen you are allowed to take your life back. Don't wait for permission. Give it to yourself.